Und wir wollen jetzt ein bisschen weiter über Politik reden. Wir möchten gerne mit Ihnen das nächste Panel, und zwar das Security Panel, mit dem Thema From Threat to Opportunity, Chance of Building Peace in the Region. Und deswegen, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, bitte begrüßen Sie hier den Arye Sharuz-Shalicar, Ministry of Intelligence. Wo ist er? Da ist er. Yep. Kobi Hubermann, meine Damen und Herren, von Israel Initiative. Matthias Küntzel. Hallo. Matthias Küntzel, Politikwissenschaftler und Publizist. Murciano, Stiftung Wissenschaft und Politik. Und meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, den von mir sehr geschätzten und von mir, wir haben uns ehrlich gesagt mal in Israel kennengelernt. Wir sind auf einer Reise gewesen in Israel, haben da nebeneinander in einem Bus gesessen, fingen an uns zu streiten, haben uns 3 Tage gestritten, sind dem beste Freunde. Deswegen freue ich mich sehr, dass er hier ist. Michel Borchardt, hallo. Bitte schön, schönes Streiten.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the security panel. This is interesting, and I was preparing for this and looking at the titles, Security Panel, From Threats to Opportunity, Chances for Building Peace in the Region. I think in many ways it is very fitting. Konrad and Adenauer, I reflected some years following the Second World War, and we have Michel Borchardt with us, who is the chief historian of the Adenauer Foundation, so you can afterwards stand me corrected if needed. He was reflected on 1914, and he said that was a time of real peace. Security and quiet have disappeared from the life of men since 1914. And perhaps these words are an interesting reminder that when we are speaking about security, we are also speaking about peace. And therefore, when we're looking from threats to opportunities, we are looking at one continuum. On the one hand, we're facing threats, and I know some of you have been in some of the other panels that have been dealing with the threats, and we'll have some colleagues to address them. But we're certainly going to also focus on the axis of opportunities. And perhaps I will introduce the speakers as I allow them to speak. But I would like to perhaps before start with Kobi Hubermann, a colleague and a friend who created the Israeli Peace Initiative, and somebody who actually spent some time with the speaker that hopefully we'll still get on the panel, Abdul Hamid Hakim. So Kobi, you are a startup venture capitalist that decided that after doing business and startup, you are trying to get some startup for peace, for looking at opportunities. And you've spent some time with our speaker, with Abdul Hamid Hakim. Can you perhaps share something about his perspective, just in case we won't get to hear him?
Thank you for the opportunity. And actually, just last night we were still communicating over WhatsApp, and my friend Abdul Hakim promised that he will be on time, and I still hope he will be here. But this is just an example. We were supposed to be here on the same stage. We are friends for more than 5 years, and I can tell you that he is one of the most impressive supporters of our initiative and peace with Israel in general. Vocal, brave, and somebody who speaks from the position of looking at the real interests in the Middle East of both the region, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. And I will tell you just one little story about him, or two. He got married about 2 years ago. One of the areas of shared interests and opportunities in the region was to make sure that in his wedding, he is able to present an Israeli song that he called Havana. Havana stands for, eventually, Havana Gila. And I have a video of our Saudi friend's wedding with Havana Gila. And if somebody told you that 5 years ago, this would seem to be completely unbelievable, but it did happen. And the other thing is, it is very rare that for the 70th anniversary of the State of Israel, you get greetings from your Saudi friends. Abdul Hamid is one of them. I miss him. I was hoping to see him here, and I hope we can still see him on the screen.
So we still have almost an hour to try and get him, and if not, perhaps we can send all of you an interesting movie from a Saudi wedding. So before we come back to the axis of opportunities, let's perhaps now start from the order at the beginning and look at the axis of threats. Obviously, as you know, Israel is facing significant threats, significant security threats, and I would like to ask Arye Sharuz, a major at the IDF, and an individual who's working for the Israeli Ministry of Intelligence, to provide some very broad perspective on this axis of threats, where Israel is being threatened today.
We're not. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I know we have 5 minutes for myself. I would like to have 5 hours to actually make you understand what's really going on, because it's not that easy to understand. In a few minutes to try and make you understand what Israel is really facing is very problematic. That's why I need to be very short and try to do my utmost to make clear that there's maybe one main factor which is threatening in a multidimensional way. When you look at the media, usually when you ask Germans, the impression is that the Palestinian issue is very high on the agenda. It is an issue, it is a threat. The Gaza Strip, Hamas, Islamic Jihad definitely are a threat. And you remember what happened a week ago, and you remember what happened once every month when we have some sort of fighting going on our southern border. We all are aware of Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is a deadly enemy, amassing more than 100,000 rockets in civilian and urban areas. A terror organization, I would say, most probably the most dangerous terror organization in the world. ISIS is nothing clear to that, nothing close to that. But as I said, there's one threat which is multidimensional, maybe multi-layered, which is Iran. Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, is the country, the regime, which is very high on the agenda when we're talking about security, when we're talking about strategic threats. And the problem is that usually people dealing with Israel, with the Middle East, with threats and strategic issues, they know about the nuclear stuff, they know about the JCPOA, they know about the Iran agreement 2015, they know that something is going on there, but once you ask a few more questions, no one is really aware what's really going on. Now, let me tell you the following thing. There are 6 points which I want to deliver here to make sure that you understand what I mean with multi-dimensional. The first point is the nuclear issue, as I said. Now, nuclear threat is something, I would say, at this moment, which is on hold. On hold because since the Iran agreement about 3 years ago, and, you know, the Americans which have pulled out, and now sanctions, we have to see how things develop. Europe is not on the side of the Americans. You have the Russians, the Chinese, and other players. There's a lot going on at these days while we are talking here. I don't know where the nuclear stuff will go in about 1, 2, 3 years. Maybe in a few months, things might heighten up. But there's one thing which people are probably not aware of. There is a nuclear competition in the Middle East. It's not only Iran that is dealing with nuclear issues. There's at least 5 other countries, central countries, enriching nuclear power. At this point, it's civil nuclear power. Turkey, Egypt, Sudan, the Emirates, and Saudi Arabia, which is talking about it. Most probably one day or another is gonna go this same direction. They all are in some sort of competition, who's developing next because of that Iranian threat scenario. So the Iranian nuclear issue is not only an issue threatening Israel, but many other countries around us, and nothing good about that will be the outcome if all these countries will develop nuclear power. The second point is the missile program, the development program of the Iranians. Now, I'm not sure if you're all aware, but the Iranians are very sophisticated. They have all sorts of rockets. They're very, very progressed in what sorts of rockets they develop from short to long range. These rockets, they don't stay in a bunker in Tehran. They are all over the place. When I say all over the place, I say the whole Middle East is delivered by Iran by these rockets. These rockets, they reach Hezbollah in Lebanon, they reach Syria, they reach the Gaza Strip, Palestinians, Sunni, Arabs. But you know, there's no love connection, but it's an Interessenbeziehung. So even the Palestinians are being delivered since years with those rockets. Point 3, Iran basing itself militarily in Syria. Now this is a huge problem for Israel, because once you have Syria totally in the hands of the Iranian regime, you have most probably will have a land corridor between Tehran over Iraq, over Syria, to the Mediterranean, to Beirut. And this is something we are not willing to happen. This is something which is very high on the Israeli agenda to make sure that this will not happen. Number 4, Iranian regional expansionism, regional activity, which means they are not only developing and delivering and indoctrinating and supporting and financially and with weapons organizations like Hezbollah, as I said, like Hashd al-Shabi, like Houthis in Yemen, as you know what's going on there, like the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, Hamas, but even more the Islamic Jihad organization in the Gaza Strip, Palestinians as well. They all are being supported one way or another by Iran. So Iran in this case is the main factor destabilizing the whole region, north of Israel, south of Israel, and east of Israel. Now this is point 4, which is very problematic, because if you don't want more refugees to come here, Iran has to be stopped. Number 5 is Iran, I would say, in Europe. Iran in Europe is an interesting issue, which I'm mentioning this point because we are in the heart of Europe. I don't know if you're all aware of what they're doing in European capitals these days. Just the last couple of months, there were a few attempted terror attacks by them on European soil. The Danish authorities, the French authorities, they arrested, with the help of Israeli authorities, information, terror suspects who were about planning a terror attack on European soil. Now this is a new thing, because until now when you speak about Islamic terror in Europe, most of us think about ISIS, we think about Sunnis. We're not all too aware of the Shia threat in Europe. So this is something which we have to make sure to have on our, on our list of priorities, watching what Tehran is doing. Now, the last point which I want to mention is that in the end, the Iranian threat is a threat which is, my personal opinion, is a threat the state of Israel has never faced before. You know, since 70 years, the foundation of the state of Israel, we had all sorts of enemies. Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, sometimes it's Hezbollah, then Hamas, then other organizations. Sometimes they come together, sometimes alone. But at this point, we have a very sophisticated arch enemy working in different fields, and I've just mentioned a few of them. And it's an enemy we are taking very, very serious. And we need to be very, very sophisticated ourselves to make sure that we will deal with this appropriately. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Arye, for giving us a very encouraging start, right? Nuclear weapons, rockets, missiles, land corridors, going all the way to Europe. I wonder if I can now turn to Matthias Küntzel. as somebody who has been working on geopolitics, an author, a political commentator, and somebody who has been really researching this arena for a number of decades. I wonder if you can give us a perspective, first of all, if you can add something on the axis of threats, and perhaps give us also a European perspective. What does this mean, not just to Israel, but also to Europe?
Okay, thank you very much. Nir, I have to beg your pardon because my train had a 2 hours delay, so we couldn't meet in advance. I also got 5 minutes, so I prepared some lines to read in order to keep myself as short as possible. So I think we have, on the one hand, also some encouraging signs. It's not only the bad picture. Today, 60% of Arab Israelis have a positive view of the state, for example. Many Sunni Arab states, for them, is normalization of ties with Israel on the agenda. And even Abdul Hamid Hakim, I would really like to hear him on the video, but he did not only express complete support for the state of Israel, its right to exist, and its historical right to Jerusalem, but also called his followers to eradicate the culture of hatred for Jews in the Arab world, including by amending school curricula, which is very important. This intent alone is an advance. If the textbooks really changed, which had not been the case until now, it would be even better. I think with the malicious murder of Jamal Khashoggi, these efforts suffered a setback. Today, no one knows for sure if the Saudi-led campaign to normalize relations with Israel will survive. I very much hope it will. More clear-cut, as Arye just told us, more clear-cut than the opportunities for peace are the threats of war. Last month, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah warned all non-Zionist Jews living in Israel to leave the country before the war between Israel and his troops will take place. This is not only bravado. We are indeed at the brink of a hot war with Hezbollah posing a threat to Israel unlike anything the Jewish state has seen so far. Various estimates put their overall rocket and missile stockpiles at between 100,000 and 140,000, up from roughly 10,000 in the last conflict in 2006. Let me quote Ginza's latest report. Today, Hezbollah possesses more firepower than 95% of the world's conventional militaries and more rockets and missiles than all European NATO members combined. Against this background, Israel cannot choose its allies. It was right to show the Saudis that world opinion will not accept the brutal murder of a journalist. However, to underestimate the Iranian threat and to therefore abandon the strategic alliance with Saudi Arabia would be an excusable mistake. Saudi Arabia is a status quo power, while Iran is a revolutionary power with a clear ambition to change, firstly, the region with a clear purpose to eradicate Israel, and to change, secondly, the world according to their Islamist and totalitarist doctrine. Presumably, in the foreseen confrontation, two camps will collide. On the one hand, a terror coalition based on Hezbollah and Hamas, financed by Turkey and Iran and supported by Russia. On the other hand, an anti-terror coalition based on the United States, the Sunni Arab states, and Israel. But what about Europe? What you ask about. What about Germany? On the one hand, Germany's government stressed the importance of Israel's security. On the other hand, when it comes to Hezbollah and Iran, our government's policy seems to be not partisan, but genus-faced. The United States blacklisted the whole of Hezbollah as a terror organization. Not only the Arab League, but also Canada, Israel, and the Netherlands did the same. Europe, not. In 2012, after Hezbollah attacked a tourist bus in Bulgaria targeting Israeli civilians, the EU listed only Hezbollah's military. Germany and the EU failed to designate Hezbollah's political wing as a terrorist organization, despite Hezbollah's claim that it does not distinct between its military and its political entities. And this appeasement has, of course, a price. Our government allows 950 Hezbollah operatives to raise funds and recruit new members on German soil. Germany became the ideal location for money laundering. First, Hezbollah agents oversee illegal narcotics operations in South America. Second, they are laundering this money in Germany, where you can pay cash for nearly everything. Third, they use these profits to purchase weapons for Hezbollah to wage war in Syria, a war that unleashed indeed the refugee crisis in Europe and Germany. And there is abundant evidence that Hezbollah is even engaging in terrorist activities in Europe, yet up to now, the European Union is eager to do business as usual with Hezbollah's Iranian sponsors. So
and not even recognize Hezbollah's political wing, so-called, as a terrorist organization.
Yes. They haven't acknowledged that the political wing is a terrorist organization. So let me conclude, there are encouraging signs for building peace in the region, since Sunni Arab states with Saudi Arabia at the top are anxious to normalize relations with Israel. There are, on the other hand, those with Tehran at the top who want to prevent normalization at all costs, who are instead preparing an anti-Semitic war against Israel. The outcome of this dispute, which touches on world peace, may depend on Europe's stance. Europe and Germany have a choice. I consider it a huge strategic mistake and in moral terms a huge shame that they try at the time being to defend Hezbollah's and Tehran's interest against the policies of Israel, the United States, and the Arab League. So let me finish with a quote by Josef Schuster, the head of the Central Council of Jews in Germany, quote, "Germany has included Israel's security as a part of its raison d'etre. As a matter of course, this should exclude doing business with a fanatic dictatorship that is calling for Israel's destruction, pursuing nuclear weapons, and financing terror organizations around the world." Thank you.
Thank you very much for this intervention, Matthias. And I think one of the things you have reminded us that as things go is in a global world, wars, terrorism, and threats also becomes much more global. When we understand that terrorist groups are operating across borders, when we remember that groups like the ISIS, the Islamic State, had received volunteers from more than 60 countries, when we understand that when we are dealing with now a crisis of immigration and refugees in Europe, we're dealing with some new issues on this scope as well. And therefore, unfortunately, we cannot no longer confine wars or relationships to a small geographical space. Let me just make a note from here to the organizers. If we are able to still renew the Skype connection to our Saudi colleague, please let us know so we can interrupt and continue. But with this in mind, after we have had a review of the threats that already was juxtaposed with some signs of opportunities, I would like to go back to Kobi Hubermann and ask you to say, a few more words about this axis. In 2003, when the late king of Saudi, the late Saudi king had launched what's called Saudi Peace Initiative, in many ways it was considered as a political exercise. Israel had not responded, but these days, which are not that far away now, are long gone. Now what we hear is that on almost every week we have another Israeli minister in another Arab country. The prime minister is visiting Oman. Israeli ministers are writing in Saudi newspapers. And in many ways, Kobi, you have been one of the people who have been in some ways the prophet. That's why probably you have the beard, who had been behind some of these efforts from some of their early days. You had created the Israeli initiative, which is a response to the Saudi initiative, and then it became the regional initiative and a true partnership between Israelis and Arabs from the region in order to try and create an axis of hope. So, Kobi, please tell us something about this work, and please try to conceptualize or describe a little bit of this axis of hope.
Okay. First of all, I will apologize for being optimistic if somebody is worried about this. I can give you a short view of what I believe has happened in the past 12 years, even before the Arab Springs. When we started to look at the situation in the Middle East 12 years ago, we had all these threats that you have mentioned, but we added a few more threats, and as a result of that, started to look for partners in the region. We've added 2 more threats to the Iranian one. One is the threat of terrorism and fundamentalist terrorism coming from the Sunni world. And the third threat is the economic collapse and the economic situation in the region. These are related because if we were to expect about 100 million unemployed young Arab people in the region, this would become a source of fundamentalism and terrorism. And therefore, we sat together with friends from Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, the Emirates, Morocco, Tunisia, Lebanon, Jordan, of course, and Palestinians. And we said, it's about time that we take responsibility and jointly address these threats. Iran, fundamentalist terrorism, and economics. What we did over the years is building the platforms to engage with leading people in the Arab world. We are an NGO. We are not related to any particular party. And we work with every Israeli government and have indeed encouraged the Israeli government to move towards a regional approach, both as a way to take a different stand vis-à-vis Iran and the threats, both as a way to address the Israeli interest and also as a way to reframe the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. With that in mind, over the years, we have created a network of about 1,000 influential people in the region with whom we did 2 major things. Number one, we engaged all of us in what we called diplomatic innovation. I come from the high-tech world and from the business world, and we engage in introducing innovative ways to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the framework of an Israeli regional Palestinian package deal. It was a different approach, and those who want to learn more about this, you can take a look at it in the internet. But the idea was that we cannot solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as an isolated conflict. We have to do it within the framework of a regional approach, and the Saudi Peace Initiative, to which we responded with the Israeli Peace Initiative, was a very good platform to begin negotiations. The second thing was that we didn't believe that it is just a diplomatic, namely security and political issue. We believed it has to include also the economic innovation. And in the past few years, we've engaged with dozens of people from the region, and we jointly created a framework to build the economy of the region, which we called Regionomics. Regionomics is a framework to build not just Israeli-Palestinian economic ties, but a regional cross-border tie as well. And we can tell you that Regionomics can be a very effective tool, not just to promote the regional package deal of peace and security, but also as a source to create motivation for normalization with Israel. And the plan will eventually, according to our assessments, will add 20 million additional jobs in the region and will add $1 trillion to the GDP of the region. We've presented Regionomics, and we are now moving to the next phase of promoting it. So, diplomatic innovation with partners in the region was a very powerful way to look at the opportunities that emerge from the shared risks, from the shared threats. Economic cooperation has been proven to be a very effective way to harness our concerns on the economic side, and converging all of this into a cohesive plan, which I can tell you has been presented to every serious leader in the region, the Israeli government, the Palestinian Authority, Egyptian leadership, Saudi leadership, UAE, Jordan, and across the international arena, from the United States, through Russia, through European capitals. Where are we heading? We believe that now is the time to move to the next phase, and that is to create civil society bridges between people in the region and to talk about narratives, to talk about the day-to-day cooperation, to bring the story of Israel that you've heard in previous sessions, to change the narratives, to change the mindset in the region, and to work and cooperate on many, many different things. And now my final point with respect to Europe and Germany in particular. In the course of presenting a different paradigm, we've heard many, many times the notion that Israelis and Palestinians should go back to the negotiation table, cut the agreement, and then the world will change. Well, I have very bad news for you. Israelis and Palestinians will not be able to cut a deal if they just go back to the negotiation and stick to the old bilateral model that has failed again and again and again. We cannot go back to this. We have to go to something new. And that is a triangular approach, bilateral and regional approach that has Israel, some of the Arab world, and the Palestinians. Like any new ideas, when you present it, you immediately find tremendous opposition. And the last, I would say, fortress of sticking to the old wrong bilateral model is here in Europe. The Europeans have not opened up to understand the need for a very different approach and are missing the opportunity to play a significant role in making it happen. And let me just quote one line from a conversation I had with one of the former foreign ministers of Germany. I said to him, we have to adopt a regional approach. And he said to me, why do we need to adopt a regional approach? The bilateral one is complex enough. And I said to him, if you do not adopt a regional approach, our region will approach you. That was about 5 years ago, and the results are very clear. It is time to go to a different methodology, different thinking, and stop blaming Israel that we are not reaching an agreement with the Palestinians. Look at the Palestinians themselves and understand that only in a framework that includes Israel, Palestinians, Egypt, Jordan, UAE, and Saudi Arabia, we have a chance to build a framework for peace between Israel and not just the Palestinians, but with the entire Arab world, to bring security through regional security, to stop Iran and terrorism, and to build regional economic cooperation based on our regionomics plan to build prosperity and hope for the region. That is what's needed now. We are making progress. We need Europe and Germany's support.
Well, Kobi, thank you very much for that, despite of you being optimistic. I would like to just shed additional context on one point that you've mentioned in the context of regionomics and 20 million jobs and $1 trillion worth of economic potential. If I were to point on one major thing that exists plenty in the Middle East and does not exist much in Europe, any idea what that might be? Well, the answer is children. And this is a very interesting answer because if you're looking at the numbers, it is expected that from the beginning of this century and until the middle of this century, the Middle East will reach from 350 million to 450 million people. And therefore, when in the regionomic plans, when they realize that in the same year, if things will go on the same course, they may have out of those 450 million people, about 100 unemployed youth, you begin to realize the danger and the way the region begins to look at it, which perhaps gives another understanding of why some others in the region have begun to take this approach a bit more seriously. And the other thing that you've said, which perhaps leads us to the next speaker, And you said about this conversation that if you're not going to approach the region will approach you. And again, Gil Murciano, you are a senior researcher and a program director at the Stiftung, Wissenschaft and Politik, one of the most significant think tanks in Germany. You have been working on programs that deals with the challenge of refugees in Europe, particularly in Germany. You've also been working with leadership programs with some of the people from these communities that are trying to make a little bit of a difference. Can you give us your perspective and also particularly bring us back to Germany and give us a sense of what does it mean when the region approaches you?
So before entering the German mess here and the issue of proactive approach by the Germans, you know, I mean, I'm not sure if I should start with the bad or good news regarding the new actors and the new powerhouses that we relate to in the Middle East at the moment. Mostly when I'm asked to speak about new type of actors and so on, in a security debate, of course, I'm basically asked to comment about ISIS or about the Al-Quds force in Iran or about pro-Iranian militias in Syria, for that matter. I want to actually follow the pathway set by Kobi in regards to the next phase of the engagement, direct engagement between people to people, between civil societies in the region and in Israel. And on that matter, to speak about basically a silent revolution when it comes to normalization or de facto normalization between the countries. We can take a step back and try to understand how we got here. If you sat here in the last 2 or 3 hours, it's pretty easy to convince you after hearing about the different civil society organizations that are involved today on the global level, but also on the regional level. It's pretty easy to convince you that we are talking about a different volume, a different type of connection with different potential to the issues of stability and peace. So first of all, there's one major, or maybe 2 major developments that comes from these tectonic changes of the last couple of years, what we called, quote unquote, the Arab Spring, for that matter. First of all, it's about the fact that those tectonic changes also broke this idea that the engagement between Israel and the Arab world should be a point-to-point connection, basically between the political leadership in both parties, and introduced a whole new set, a whole new type of different actors in the Arab world, in the form of think tanks, in the form of civil society organization, humanitarian aid organization, refugee organization, so it's also the diaspora for that matter, in the form of intellectual forums. One of the greatest promises, I think, of Kobi's organization, of Israeli Yozemet, is the ability, by the way, to work on the multi-layered level. So it's not just about the elites, but also about the business communities. It's about different types or different points of contact between the parties, so to speak. We see Israelis now present in completely different arenas, new arenas in the Middle East. The Mediterranean, for example, or Iraq, by the way, where Israelis from Iraqi descent actually build bridges vis-a-vis cultural, vis-a-vis authors and writers in Iraq, for that matter. So this is one thing. It's about the diversification, if you will, of the Arab world when it comes to policy circles, when it comes to conceptual circles and so on. But there's another major development, and that's actually on the level of narratives. Now, we have to be really clear about what we're talking about here. We are talking about a set of narratives that were affiliated with the old regime. Now, once the set of narratives is being challenged, then we also see a difference on the level of narratives regarding Israel. The animosity towards Israel and the perception of any relations with Israel as a taboo was a core issue, core narrative, led not just by the hostile regimes, but also in places like Egypt. So with the decline of these narratives, a new options, or the option to challenge the narrative about Israel, also opens up. But it's crucial to understand, I think, to differentiate between 2 different things. We are not talking, at least based on my perception on the level of people to people, we are not talking about a change of narratives regarding the state of Israel, meaning the political apparatus. We are talking about a change of mindset regarding Israelis. Now, I had a direct experience in the last 18 months I've been involved in building an organization alongside an incredible group of Syrian civil society leaders that hopes to turn Syrian refugees here in Germany into foreign policy advisors, to use the wealth of knowledge. So I, as an Israeli, as a Zionist, as a former officer, as a former government employee of Israel, found myself working with former Syrian diplomats, ambassadors, former army officers, journalists, leaders from within the Syrian community. And what I experienced is a full willingness not just to accept my presence, but also to consider my issue or consider my involvement as a natural thing. In other words, a willingness to accept me as a Middle Eastern. Now, Nir knows this issue very well. Let's say a couple of months ago when we had the tragic experience of the Assad regime campaign to regain control over the south part of Syria. This tidal wave or this of calls, of desperate calls from friends, in your case, friends of friends, asking for help, asking for specific policy solutions in order to save their families, in order to save their colleagues and so on. This is a point when you understand that you are basically part of an ecosystem that includes also you. That the problems from the other side, from those borders of conflict are also relevant to you. One important point, by the way, and I think it relates to the civil society and to the silent revolution altogether, regarding the issue of Israeli strategic aid or humanitarian aid to Syria. Although we spoke a lot about it today, I don't think we can really appreciate or grasp the importance of these activities in winning hearts and minds, excuse me for the cliche, on changing narratives, not just in the south part of Syria, not just with the opposition, not just with the diaspora, but also on a regional level regarding Israel. Now, we tend to emphasize the role of the IDF and the role of the government in supporting this action, in building hospitals inside Syria, all true. But we also have to remember that this initiative started from the civil society in Israel. It's an unprecedented case where Israeli civil society initiate, not just participate, but initiate an entire strategic effort that changed narratives on the other side. And only then the government and the army joined well into the effort. It provides us with an interesting precedent or an interesting example to the role that Israeli civil society can play in Israel. But in order to fulfill this potential, I think we also have to change some mindset about the way we see or the way foreign policy is done in Israel. The idea of foreign policy led by Israelis and not by Israel, utilizing this advantage that non-governmental Israelis possess today, is a chance, is a strategic chance on that level. And I think that, for Israelis it sounds very unnatural. Foreign policy is something that is handled by the MFA in Israel. For Europeans, I think you will be a little bit more open to the idea because when we speak about German foreign policy today, that's obviously not something that is just the mandate of the Auswärtiges. It's also represented by Stiftungen, by the GIZ, by a number of different organizations. We can create the same model, the same network dynamic when it comes to foreign policy that is led by Israelis, and maybe utilize the intellectual wealth and the diversity of the Israeli civil society in order to promote or to build bridges for stabilities, and maybe even in the future to discuss conflict resolution and management for that matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gil. And now the last but not least, at least for the first round, I think we have a chance for another short second round, is Michel Borchardt, who may have a chance to comment on the quote I had before, since he is the leading historian for the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, and also somebody who is writing now a book on Konrad Adenauer in Israel, and also somebody who had managed the Konrad Adenauer office in Israel. So you have an interesting perspective, both from an Israeli and a German perspective. And I want to ask you, first of all, if you can comment on the broader vision of Konrad Adenauer in that sense, and more particularly, if you agree with this axis that is really juxtaposed between threats and opportunities. Can you tell us something about what your foundations are doing in order to try and promote this uneasy path for peace and stability in the region?
I think if Konrad Adenauer would still be living, he would be in a deep friendship with Israel, because he was actually a Rhenish Catholic Zionist. He was the head, the honorable head, so to say, of the Pro-Palestina Committee, 1925, and that was a very Zionist organization. So just that is maybe my comment. I'm very happy to be here. It eases a little bit the pain of my Israel homesickness. I'm just, again, in Germany since 1 year. I try to speak in English, but I still have to admit that my relation to the English language is somehow like my relation to my wife. I love her, but I can't control her all the time, so please Next time. Next time. If you were asking me how, in general, Germans view the Israeli-Palestinian arena, I have to say, after my experience in Jerusalem with some grief, that I found it particularly irritating during my time that you will always find a high level of superficiality when Germans speak about Israel. And that is something that really disturbed me a lot. And the problem is this superficiality is actually combined yet with the really decisive will to still take up a clear position based on almost nothing then, at times at least. So I'm not going deeper into the fact that this superficiality can also be found in the political echelons, because I still want to have a job tomorrow. But I think it is crucial. It is not our duty in Germany not to criticize Israel, and nobody in Israel actually expects that. But it is our, excuse my French, damn duty to inform ourselves. Let me talk a little bit about what we did about the conflict, because let's for a moment just assume there would be a negotiation table. In my capacity as a head of the office of the Adenauer Foundation, I had kind of a fetish, and that is doing empirical research. So we did a couple of polls. And there was actually one poll we did together with the Israeli Democracy Institute, and we did it in Israel as well as in the Palestinian territories. And we asked the people, in what field would you be willing to make concessions in case there might be a negotiated peace agreement ahead? And the interesting thing is, you know that we in Germany sometimes a little bit preoccupied with the settlement issue. And it is, of course, a serious issue, but concerning the question of the settlement, concerning the questions of the settlements in the West Bank, there was a huge majority. Please let me talk. There was a huge majority on both sides who would be willing to make concessions here. And that's very interesting. Both sides would be willing to make concessions here. That shows, by the way, that however important this issue is, it might be wrong to see this issue as the only obstacle to peace like we tend to in Germany. There are the other typical issues in which, of course, it is difficult to reach concessions, and that is, on the one hand, the refugee issue, and the other one is the demilitarization issue. But I would like to point the finger to one issue that still is a very important issue, and there both sides are not willing to make any concessions, and that is Jerusalem. Due to that, it might be important to avoid any kind of further religious charging of the conflict in Jerusalem on both sides. For the last decades, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was mainly a territorial conflict with some religious dimensions. If this turns to anything that is near to a religious conflict with territorial dimensions, it is simply unsolvable. This is, and I'm just saying that, why I think that all escalation of the situation around the Temple Mount should be avoided. And in that regard, the UNESCO resolutions have been, to a dramatic extent, counterproductive, because they actually had the potential to foster the escalation and not to bring what is the meaning of UNESCO, and that is peace. And let me put another elephant to that imagined negotiation table. There is clearly another dimension, and that is the dimension, and that is often also ignored in Germany, is the fact that Jordan is part of the game here. So let's talk for a minute about Jordan. This is especially in Jerusalem because of the fact that the king of Jordan plays the role of what could call the Lord Protector of the Temple Mount. And that has to do, of course, with the peace agreement between Jordan and Israel. I'm sure that nobody in this room will deny how important the peace with Jordan is for the security of Israel. But recent developments shows that the king of Jordan is obviously under huge internal pressure. So if there's the allegation in Jordan in which the majority of the population has a Palestinian descent, that the Lord Protector on the Temple Mount is not delivering in this capacity, he might be in great danger. So whoever ignites fire on the Temple Mount religiously might also set the Jordanian king on fire, and that is not at all in the interest of Israel. Hence, I think, and this is something where I think Germany should engage even more, even though we are the second biggest donor in Jordan, we should put much more money into Jordan, because I think Jordan is actually really crucial for stability besides Israel. The region might be a key to a track to peace. We have been talking about that. I have to say that I see no, and I fully subscribe to what Kobi Hubermann said, I see no alternative to a regional track to peace. And this you can also see in the polls that we are doing, that there is actually also an increasing level of sympathy for the Arab Peace Initiative. And I would just to point the finger then to, finally, to two things. I think it might now be very important to establish track 2 dialogues between Israel and the Arab states, especially when it is about security issues. And that's actually possible. Another short advertisement block, what we did in Israel is we had such an initiative together with the INSS, a wonderful institution in Israel, almost 2 years ago. And it was clearly to be seen that especially the Iranian threat seems to be a strong unifying factor. If you have Arabs sitting around the table, it is easy for them to say we have the feeling that we have common interests because there is this imminent Iranian threat. Just as an anecdotal evidence, you could read in the newspapers that Bibi Netanyahu somehow pledged to President Trump not to give up on Crown Prince bin Salman after the Khashoggi murder. I mean, we still have to see that Saudi Arabia is a Wahhabite country with a Wahhabite Islam, and that is not far away from ISIS. So, but I think it is very important to look at this. So now, what does this mean for the Israeli-Palestinian echelon? It might be weird that somebody who is a Christian Democrat like me refers to the Ostpolitik of the Social Democrats, actually, and I hope that my colleague and friend Michaela Engelmeier will salute to that. But I think what the Social Democrats did in the 70s might also be a role model for what could be done in Israel. As we can't reach a negotiation like a full two-state solution, I think it might be good to remember what the people there did in the social democracy in Germany. They said that vis-à-vis the Soviet Union, two slogans should be applied, and I say them in German: Wandel durch Annäherung and Politik der kleinen Schritte. They could roughly be translated by change through approachment and strategy of small steps. And the water issue, the highly disputed water issue, actually we can see some significant progress here, as well as the re-establishment of the joint Israeli-Palestinian Water Commission. That's one example for what actually can be done in this arena of small steps towards a better situation. And I think what Kobi Hubermann just said is also the field of the digital economy, in which some of the first seeds have been planted, might be another in the near future. Same somehow applies, and this is the combination I would like to do. It's not only that I think this policy of the small steps should apply to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but it should be combined with this regional approach. The same should be then applied to the regional arena. I do, of course, acknowledge, and that is my final remark, the fact that it takes two to tango. And there are three disturbing strains on the Palestinian side, which make it hard to imagine that there will be progress on the negotiation table, as well as on these small steps towards peace. And these three disturbing strains are still the ongoing battle between Hamas and Fatah, which is further weakening the PA. The second is the vacuum of power is foreseeable. If Abbas is resigning or dying, the list of possible successors does not even look very good. And the third thing is the PA is totally occupied with the huge pressure of somehow preserving their power. So the internal Palestinian factors limit clearly the possibility and the rooms to maneuver. It also remains to be seen, of course, where the current developments in Israel will lead to, will be heading to. Will we have elections? Will we have a new government? Whatever happens, I would like to close, I wanted to close with the wonderful quote Melody just used, but she stole it away from me, so I have to close with the wonderful, also wonderful quote that has been said by Theodor Herzl some weeks prior to his death. He said, don't make any nonsense while I'm away. And so I think there is still a lot of responsibility, but the responsibility is also clearly on the shoulders of Europe and of Germany to foster and to support a regional approach.
Thank you very much. I thought that we had a chance for another round, but I had to get the indication that we actually need to end. In the chapters of our fathers, it said that it's not upon us to finish the task, but we do not have the privilege to refrain from pursuing it. And I think if we've had something in this panel is a realization that the axis of threats and the axis of opportunities are very much together, and that all of us will have the task of continuing it until we get peace in the Middle East.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. The security panel.